Welcome to episode 15 of Crave the Book. In today's episode, we're going to be covering chapters 48 through 50 of Tracy Wolff's Crave series. And in these chapters, we get a little bit more of Grace's and Jaxon's relationship, or their blooming relationship, I guess I should say. And we get to hear a little bit more about Jaxon's backstory and Hudson, his brother. So without further ado, guys, let's go ahead and get started. What's up, guys? Welcome to episode 15 of Crave the Book. Last week, we covered Guide to Katmere Academy, so that episode was a little off topic from our normal episodes. But today, we are back on schedule, and we're going to be covering chapters 48 through 50 of Tracy Wolff's Crave. So a lot went on through these episodes. Really excited to cover some things. A little bit of spoiler topics, mainly just me and Amber kind of swooning over future characters. So we'll try to keep those contained. Hopefully we can not, tremble too far into our spoilers. But speaking of those, Amber, do you want to let them know what sound our new listeners should maybe be looking out for in the event that they haven't finished the series yet?
Yes, so if you have not finished the series and you do not want any spoilers to grace your ears, see what I did there? You want to be listening out for the sound of a chicken. And once you hear the sound of chicken, you want to turn it off. It's not a chicken, guys. It is, of course, the wolf howl. Woo! And once you hear that noise, that means that we have moved on from the chapters that we cover this week. And we are moving into spoiler territory where we'll be talking about fan theories and just our overall fangirling over characters we have not met yet.
I mean, we've kind of met him. Everybody should know his name by now.
Damien. The crab.
All right, guys.
The were-crab.
The were-chicken. So, guys, our goal for the podcast, we're pretty much at the end of Crave. Where we're hitting that final, few chapters. So our hope is to start reading Crush in the new year. So you guys can look forward to that if you've been holding out or kind of, been just really waiting for us to hit Crush, because to be honest, I think Amber agrees, Crave is probably our least favorite book of the series. Crush is my favorite of the books. Covet has some of my favorite scenes, though. As a whole, I think that Crush was like my favorite. Yeah, I think that just mentally I connected with it a lot more. I laughed a lot more. Covet was very stressful and
intense.
Very exciting. So
yeah, and we don't even know what's going to be in court yet. So also every time, so I have finally pre-ordered Court. I know that sounds bad, but I finally pre-ordered it now that I've sorted out my bookshelves and I know that I've got space. And for some reason, Covet is called Crown everywhere. Is that just for like translation reasons? Like Covet couldn't be translated, so therefore they went with the word crown. I don't know. But yeah, my husband ordered it for me for my Christmas present. And he's
or court, you mean?
No, he ordered crown for my Christmas present. And he was like, wait, isn't crown's never been mentioned? And I was like, crown? I don't want crown. Turns out it was Covet. Has anybody else had that?
Maybe it's crayon, like
cranberry.
Like like a crayon.
Crayon.
A crayon,
a
like
crayon?
That you color with. A crayon.
We've been taking the mickey out of both of each other's accents for the last 3 weeks.
Crayon.
Crayon.
All right, guys, let's go ahead and jump in, because we started the chapters. There was quite a hangover in between where we stopped recording and started recording Guide to Katmere Academy, and now we're back in action with Jaxon sinking his teeth into Grace's neck.
I also read a few books in between as well, so I was a bit out of the loop. I read. What did I read? I read
Throne of Glass.
Throne of Glass, and I also read A Touch of Darkness and A Touch of Ruin, which are like Hades and Persephone's kind of fan fiction kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So when I was like, I was like, who are we talking about again? And it was really nice to go back to characters that were like simple. I know that sounds really mean, but I think that Throne of Glass, the main character, is quite complex, straight off the bat. So it was really nice to just go back to little simple Grace and simple emo Jaxon.
Little Grace, she doesn't know yet. She's still just finding out about her world. Her mind hasn't really fully ascended yet into full, oh my god, the world is ending Grace. And all she cares about in these chapters is the fact that Jaxon is biting her. Yeah, it's this is the only like that, and it's really just the beginning of it. This is the only scene where I'm just like, I kind of like Jaxon. I like him for about the first 2 pages of these chapters. And then I'm like, okay, we get it. Swoon over Jaxon. He's so broody.
I was getting more frustrated with Grace. Grace is a mood killer.
Yeah, she's making out with him, and then she's like, so what about your brother?
She's she's proper edging him. Like but like not in a good way, not in a like delayed gratification way, in a I'll tease you to the edge and then I will mention something so unsexy that you have to stop for like 20 minutes, get a breather in, then we'll go back to it later.
Yeah. And let's tell some goofy jokes right in the heat of the moment.
Yeah,
and see
it's
what
like,
happens.
oh, like I feel really bad for Jaxon, and not that like he deserves some and he didn't get some. It's just in a way that he doesn't know whether she's hot then cold, and I think that would just be really confusing to me.
It's some mixed signals there.
But this is her first experience of it as well, isn't it? So maybe she was not really sure what to do or how to be sexy.
Or how far to go. Like, where do you stop? Like, especially when you're a teenager, like, how far you want to go, but what's the acceptable distance to go? I think that it's a matter of self-control on both parties, because once you start slipping down that slope, it's like, oh, do we want to slip all the way? Or do we want to do what some would consider the right thing and kind of prolong it a little bit and enjoy the ride a little bit more? And really, I would say, just as an adult looking back, there really is no right or wrong there if you're being safe. It just kind of depends on how you personally connect with another person. I would say that if you find yourself able to grow emotional attachments to people that you connect with, prolonging things is probably the better way to go, simply because you don't want to form instant attachment to someone who isn't the one, even if you believe early on that they are. You guys probably understand how quickly relationships can change, where you think that someone is the one and then they're not. And you don't want to give everything to them if you're the type who grows that attachment very, very fast and from physical connections. But some people just aren't like that. Physical and emotional are 2 completely separate entities, and you can have them both and keep them separate and not really care. So it just depends on what type of person you are. Neither is unhealthy. It's just making sure that you don't end up in an unhealthy place, which Grace is. I would say that Grace, the way that she's speaking, it is borderline unhealthy, just a little bit. She's moving a little fast.
I think that comes from an experience, is that it's not that you don't know how to stop. It's also you don't know how to wind down. You don't know how to slowly move away from it and bring the session to an end. So I don't know whether you noticed, but when reading through that scene, it was either she was interrupted by her phone or the door or a sudden thought that made her like, oh, I realize that I need to ask him before we continue. I need to ask him this question because he deserves that. I'm not really sure what that means. But Jaxon was always the one to pull away. Yeah. or they were interrupted. And that was because of her inexperience. She didn't quite know how to stop. And that's something that I experienced as a teenager as well. It was like I'm kind of bored of kissing now, or I'm kind of bored of shopping now. I don't know the social cues enough to say, can we move on to something different? And I mean, Starla, she saw me for the last 2 weeks. She realizes how bored I get with activities and how much I want to move on from things very fast. And it's like an ADHD kind of thing, is that I just know that I want to move on from every task. I don't like to sit and do one task for so long. And I felt like Grace was very content to just stay there and make out for an entire hour. And it never got any more intense. Did you ever have those kind of relationships where you were perfectly content to just kiss for an hour?
No.
Me neither.
No. Sure, that might have been what was happening, but in my mind, I'm like, do something else. Do something else. Something else.
And it's not like necessarily like getting sexually more into it, but it would be like I would look at the clock and go, I got stuff to do. I don't want to spend an hour doing this. Can we go, like, maybe change location? Go for a walk?
It's like dancing. You can't just, if you're dancing with someone and then they dip you down and swing you back up, but then they dip you down and swing you back up, and they just do that motion over again.
It's just repetitive.
Yeah, it might have been fun the first time, but after they've done it like 10 times, you're like, okay, can we shimmy over to the left, shimmy to the right, do something else?
Yeah.
Twirl me?
And I know that your lips start to get like sore and puffy from kissing so much. It's not pleasant.
That's funny. In the book that I'm writing, that's like one of the big things that once my characters Vivian and Dane start getting physical. That's like one of the descriptors I use is like kiss swollen lips, because once you hit that point where you're like smooching all the time, you do start getting those.
And you like, because I remember being a teenager and having a very heavy makeout session, which I was very bored with, but I did it for my partner at the time. And I came downstairs and my parents had known immediately what I had been doing. And I thought that was just them making assumptions about me being a randy teenager. But then I saw myself in the mirror, and like I looked like I had a cold sore all the way around my mouth because of the suction for like an hour. It was gross. Those memories will stay with you forever.
Especially when you're older and the guy's like stubbly and you start getting like that stubble burn. Yeah. So I had a couple favorite lines in these chapters that I just like laughed, and my husband would look over at me and I would just shake my head because I was laughing so hard. My favorite one though was Grace just says, "He gives it to me." And I'm just thinking, oh yeah. Like she wasn't specific about the line at all. She just goes, "He gives it to me." And then another thing that we finally get to hear a little bit more about are these earthquakes that have been occurring literally since Grace has arrived at the school. Seems like every time something, crazy happens or she's in an unsafe situation, the earth starts to shake. And we find out that it is Jaxon. And he kind of goes on this big rampage of, just talking about how he's the most powerful damn thing in the world. Yada, yada, yada. And, I'm reading it thinking, doubt. Yeah, maybe we'll save that for spoiler section.
I put, like, he said, like, no one is as powerful as me. And then he literally follows it, like, the next page by describing his brother's superpower. And it's the most terrifying superpower ever. Like, it's like the ability to influence anybody to do anything, whether it's their free will or not. He can literally command them to do something. He can control them. versus
tell them to kill themselves.
Yeah. Tell them to kill somebody else and then kill them. Like anything. He could tell them to do anything versus I can make things float.
I can make everything go floaty.
Yeah. Or I can make the ground go shaky.
I make ground go shaky. His earthquake hornies.
It just feels a bit self-centered to me. And I know that when you are a teenager, your world is the only one that you understand. You're not very capable of empathy to the degree where you think that you could not be the most powerful person. But yeah, he was like, yeah, I'm the most powerful. No one is as powerful as me. And he can't even imagine saying, oh, Hudson was way more powerful. I just defeated him through sheer luck.
Maybe he means now that Hudson is gone, he is now the most powerful. He is the chosen one now. Oh God. So another line that made me laugh was Grace saying that he was sucking on my lip until it feels like 4th of July. And I'm just thinking
That's
to
pins
myself,
and needles, love.
Yes. Huh?
That's pins and needles.
What?
4th of July and your lips. I'm pretty sure that's pins and needles. Your lips have gone numb because you won't stop macking out on each other.
I said just what our founding fathers had envisioned when, on the 4th of July of emo vampire boy and Grace making out.
Ew.
What would be the British equivalent to that? Sucking on my lip until it feels like 4th of July. What would your equivalent be?
Bonfire night or firework night or New Year's Eve, probably.
Sucking on my lip until it feels like New Year's Eve. That doesn't have
I think
quite the ring
bonfire
to
night,
it.
but then that just sounds like she's got a rash.
Sounds itchy.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Sounds like she's got to check the pile for hedgehogs just in case.
So Jaxon, when Grace goes into his little reading alcove, which it says alcove, I always picture this as like a common room, maybe
like a walk-in closet size.
Yeah,
when it's like, oh, I have a closet, and then you're like, this is a room.
I envision it like Harry Potter common rooms. Like not huge, but there's a couch, a coffee table.
The thing is, it's just his. It never ever alludes to anybody else having a room that stems off from it. And then Hudson obviously has his room that they like.
Why do they have such big rooms?
Yeah, and I'm like, maybe it's because he's a prince.
Yeah, I wonder if Flint has a big room.
Yeah, because Grace's and Macy's room isn't huge. They have like a single room that has the fridge and the TV and everything all in. Like it's like a little studio flat with the bathroom attached. Whereas Jaxon seems to have like a suite. Does he have like the penthouse?
Maybe. Well, he's in the tower. Maybe it's like his parents insisted or something.
Yeah.
Like, no, my son will not
the
be
chosen one.
Yeah, it could look weak on the rest of the vampires to, maybe they need to keep like the princes at the top. And I'm assuming if it's actually a castle, there's more than one tower. So it would make sense for like children of the royal families to have their own special areas. I mean, Hudson had like the basement, but it still sounded big.
Something weird about the idea of a werewolf king.
The werewolf king, the alpha.
Yeah, but that sounds weird. Like you wouldn't imagine that they would have like a royal family like that because they work in packs.
Yeah, we haven't really heard anything about a wolf court, have we?
No.
We've got vampire court, we've got witches court, we've got gargoyle court, and we have dragon court, but we have not heard a single thing about a wolf court.
I'm excited.
I hope we get some more of this in court.
Yeah.
Crown. So Jackson's little reading alcove is a mess. Grace is really upset apparently about the coffee table for some reason. I don't
even remember the coffee table.
Yeah, she was like, oh, I really like this coffee table. He's like, I'll get a better one. Like, okay, rich boy, calm down.
Yeah, but buy a coffee table based on the girl that you met not a week ago.
Yeah. Oh, hell yeah. Maybe he'll carve it with his mind.
Yeah, maybe that's his that's an engagement present. It's like he's going to propose
coffee
with a coffee
table?
he floats it out of a box.
See, I'm like almost 30, so to me, if I received a nice coffee table, I'd be like, oh, rad. I don't know if I was 17, I would be like, I don't drink coffee. Yeah, so he talks about how it's going to take time for him to really be able to control himself because it started with big, powerful earthquakes. And then apparently he was able to control himself a little better so that he only destroyed the entire alcove.
Yeah.
But you had noted that it's going to take him time to figure out how to control the things that Grace makes him feel. But
what is it he feels? Because that would be concerning to me.
I would want to know exactly what emotion it was so that I could avoid making him feel that way.
Well, no, you imagine you walk into your basement and you see that your husband has punched a hole in the wall, and you go, "Why did you punch a hole in the wall?" And he says, "Because you make me feel all kinds of things."
Which
You'd
things?
be like, what things? What did I do? Why did something I made you feel equal violence?
Yeah.
Like, I would be concerned, no matter what the emotion that he was feeling, I wouldn't want violence to be the thing that he used to express it. Like, I understand, like, sports, so getting the something out because men are quite, what's the word? Visceral with the way that they can express their feelings, so they get a punching bag or something. Now, I wouldn't see that as violence. I would use that as exerting himself to get out that energy. But punching and destroying, like actually rendering something to rubble, is what she said. She's like, it was just a pile of rubble. I would be just a bit concerned as to what I had done or what I had said to make him feel so strongly that he had to destroy something.
Oh, I'm so horny! And then just everything in the room explodes.
He's just like rammed a glory hole into the wall.
Which brings me to my next funny line that made me laugh. She's telling a joke, something about what did the dinosaur say when... And then he cuts me off with a kiss and a yank.
Ew.
Ew.
I don't want a yank. Nobody wants a yank.
Do you want a yank, Amber? Do you want your husband to give you a good yank?
No, he took me to see some yanks last week, but...
Or the Americans are the only yanks around here. Yeah.
Do you know what we call yanks in London? The Cockney rhyming slang is septics.
Ew, like a
septic tank.
Ew.
Yank. And I'm like, that doesn't make anyone feel any pleasure towards Americans.
That makes me have to poop.
Ew.
Ew. Which, that's Grace really knows
Which
how to
leads
kill
me
a
on to my next.
He cuts me off with a kiss and a yank. And then Grace
she's being frustrating. She's killing the mood with stupid jokes.
And then it shifts immediately after that to freaking Jaxon just being like, I killed my brother, which at that point, like, close the book. I'm done. I'm team brother. I'm team dead brother at this point.
Always. I'm always team brother. No matter the franchise, the story, I'm always team brother.
Why is it always brother? It's always brother.
Because, there's a reason that you've got to wait in anticipation to be introduced to the brother of the original mainland. Yeah. And that's why I chose a man that does not have a brother. And then he found out that he had a brother a few years later. And I'm like, oh no.
Oh no.
and then my husband said that his name is Russell, and I was like, no, I'm all right.
Yeah, that's
I don't
not
want a Russell.
name. Ew. That's not a name you can
do
whisper.
Anything with.
Sorry to all of our Russells out there. So when Jaxon, he talks about Hudson, and then
how
Grace
much
is like,
more powerful he is than Hudson, and he's like, oh, I'm so powerful.
So powerful. And then he says, do you know what it feels like to be able to do this? And then everything floats. And then he says, or this. And then everything explodes. And honestly, that sounds a lot to me like Edward Cullen's, as if you could outrun me. As if you could fight me off.
Throwing a log.
Throwing the tree. Yeah. Like, it gave me same vibes. And that's
this is the skin of a killer bailer.
This is the and then Jaxon holding out his cell phone, taking a selfie because he can't have mirrors. This is the reflection of a killer, Grace. Yeah, I read that to my husband, the not having mirrors, so having to take a selfie to see his reflection, and my husband was just like, I can't even deal with this right now.
It was the way he introduced it as well. It wasn't like, well, I have to take photos of myself. He's like, selfie anyone? And I'm like, ew. Like, he didn't even take like, as far as I had understood from reading it, it wasn't like he took pictures of them two together. Like, I want a selfie of us together. Like, oh, should we get a selfie? Should we get a picture of us? Or anything like that. He genuinely took a picture of himself to see what he looked like. And she was just stood in the room watching him. Have you ever been in a room where somebody suggests taking a selfie of just themselves?
Have you ever been in a room with someone who is trying to take a selfie of themselves and you're just watching them?
Yeah.
And they're repeatedly taking pictures of themselves looking like they're having a great time,
Yeah,
and then
you
like
just stood there like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that he never clears his camera reel.
It's just a bunch of selfies of him like looking for like a zit on his face or fixing his hair
and
or
the thing
checking
is,
his teeth.
You know that he gets adventurous once or twice a time, like, because he's going to get bored of taking a selfie every time he needs to know what he looks like, right? So he's going to get adventurous with the poses.
We need a Jaxon cell phone calendar shoot.
Yes.
Just all of his like pictures of him like posing.
The occasional duck face.
The occasion. Oh my god.
Like, kawaii.
We need Lulu Lucky to
yes,
commission us a picture of Jaxon taking a selfie, doing a duck face,
and like the Asian like two fingers and happy face, like
the ew.
Yep.
Yeah. Ew Jaxon. Oh god, I love it.
One with a filter.
Yeah, the stereotypical Snapchat dog filter.
Oh, no, I was thinking a Halloween vampire. But the teeth are like, you know when you move slightly and the teeth don't quite follow you? So they're just on the side.
I think it would be even better if Grace like held the camera out and he didn't realize it was going to be the filter. He's like, really?
Yeah, this podcast has devolved.
Well, I don't know what your next note means. All I have is because you're mine, but you didn't give me any context.
It's such a trope. It's such a trope. And I know that, like, I have that guilty pleasure about it, but I never want it to be in, like, a possessive way. And it's never the woman first. It's always the, like, male protective dominance. Yeah, like, you're mine. And
Piss
it's
on
like,
a tree.
I want that, but I also don't want that.
Like, that sounds nice. It's like when you read it, it sounds really nice. When you see it in a movie, it's pretty nice. But, you know, it's like, I think that the best way to experience too much of that, if you've never actually felt it, is to read something like 50 Shades, where, like, yeah, it starts out really sexy, but then, like, you start reading it and you're like, okay, calm the hell down, Christian.
Yeah.
God.
A touch of darkness was very much like that. Like, it actually made me uncomfortable. But I thought that 50 Shades was at least educational in sexual terms, but this was not. This this was educational in Greek gods and mythology. And it still gave me those, like, he's a bit of a stalker and has issues and I don't know what to do with it. And he just kept repeating, because you're mine. And it's like, okay, I like the idea that you feel like I belong to you and you belong to me together, but it's always the man going, you're mine first, and never actually assuming that he never goes, I belong to you. That would be more romantic, is that I am yours.
That's why I like Hudson so much, because he's never just like you're mine,
you belong to
therefore
me and only me.
Exactly. You cannot do anything of your own free will because you belong to me. And Jaxon is like that. He's like, oh, you need to stay back. You need to be safe. I need to protect you. Yeah. So
yeah, and
anyway.
It's almost like you are not a whole person on your own. You need to have another half of you to be complete, and you are mine so that you are a whole person.
Yeah, and it's not like you weren't a whole person before you found that person. I mean, you might be happier, but you weren't half of a person.
No.
Don't let
me and my husband say that we are like two halves of a whole. That we are. We know that we are better together. We are more succinct together. He says, "I like you are like another limb of me." And that's really nice to know that, like, he's like, I think of you all the time. Like, whenever I'm out, I get you things because I know I want to see you happy. But he also says, it's not like I don't function without you, though.
Yeah, if you were in a, like, fiery car crash or something, he would not just poof and puff into a puff of sparkles and smoke and disappear.
But he would miss me as if he had lost an arm.
Yeah, exactly. It would be like, oh, a limb has been cut off. This really sucks. But, in time, and hopefully you guys feel that way too. Like, don't ever allow somebody to be such a big part of your life that if, something happened to them, you wouldn't be able to go on without them, because that's
There's
not
no
healthy
autonomy
either.
there.
Yeah. And there is so much more to your life. If anything, if you find yourself in that position, dedicate yourself to something that will complete you, that could help others. Find a way to channel that. Find a charity to work with until you are able to feel more complete. Find something that, at least if my thought is, if I am hurting that badly to the point where I cannot function, I will keep myself busy, and at least I can use that time to help somebody else. Which is ultimately why when my grandma passed away last year, I started writing my book. I was like, well, I am so depressed that I cannot function and I cannot work. So at least I can write. Are you there?
Yeah. I was just letting you go. You were being emotional and turmoil.
I was being emotional.
And I just wanted to let you fledge the nest, whatever it is. Go. Be free.
Do you want some water? That's mine and Amber's joke when someone is crying and you don't know how to help them and you're in that awkward position. It's just, do you want some water? That's how I felt reading Jaxon, so upset. Oh, I killed my brother and I'm happy about it. Do you want some water, Jaxon?
Yeah, great. And meanwhile, Grace is like, I've never connected with anybody on an emotional level so much as this. And I'm like, shut up. He's just being an emo.
Aww. Little emo Jaxon.
So talking about your mind, he then broaches off into a topic of like, okay, so we need to discuss how we're going to keep you safe. Because apparently Flint is trying to kill her.
She's like, no, Flint would never. And that whole thing, it's really confusing to me. I'm still, of all the things in Crave that I actually wish just weren't in there, the whole throwing Flint under Grace, that whole thing, Jaxon throwing Flint, I can't picture it. It doesn't make sense to me. it's really the only part of the book that I wish just wouldn't have been included or would have been done differently, because I struggle to picture it. I mean, I can picture it, but it just doesn't feel realistic to me in my brain. I struggle to figure it out. I have questions. I would need to see it.
You know, like physics question.
Yeah.
Falling from a tree into snow wouldn't hurt that much. So all he had needed to do was blimp some more snow under her.
Yeah, and what was it? Because Flint, like, he grabbed Grace. What I can't figure out is, did Jaxon toss Flint into Grace and then Flint grabbed Grace, or did Jaxon throw Flint and they just happened to, like, cross over each other right at the intersection of, like, an X and make impact at that exact point?
I don't know, but because whatever he did, whatever Jaxon did to get Flint to catch Grace or break her fall or whatever, I know that I would rather land in snow than on another human being. We know that Flint is not a human being, but he still is a human being in that form. He's still going to be a solid object.
Muscular, too.
Landing in snow is much more agreeable to the idea of falling. And also, it wasn't just those two that were involved. Everyone was watching. So Jaxon would have had to have made it very convincing of like a performance for not just the rest of the school, but Macy, Grace's best friend and cousin, watching it from the tree. And she knew Grace was falling. It wasn't like she just saw the aftermath. She saw Grace falling, and she just saw this weird combining of bodies on the way down to the floor and didn't think anything of it. Like, it wasn't that they got her to her room and Macy went, okay, so that was a bit weird.
Yeah, and you know, someone being thrown versus someone diving to save somebody, I'm sure that looks very different. If someone is thrown, I'm sure they're going to be in a completely different angle.
And they're going to have momentum as well, because there's force behind the push. Grace just fell, like the branch broke and she fell. There wasn't any force behind her drop.
Flint's going horizontally, he's
aerodynamic. He's a dragon.
He wasn't a dragon when he
should have been.
I mean, that to me would have been a more, like, Jaxon pisses him off somehow, Flint turns into a dragon. I feel like that would have been like a more, I don't know.
It would have been a softer landing as well.
Yeah, you could, like, I'm sure that a dragon wing stretched taut would be more like a little trampoline.
I don't understand the scene. And I know that we're picking apart Tracy's writing, and we're not meant to. But I think that we need to see it to, like, understand what is happening.
Tracy evolves as an author so much throughout the series. Crave, it feels very much like she didn't have everything figured out yet. And then that's why I love Crush and Covet so much, is you can feel her evolve. And anytime I talk to someone who's started to read the series and they're like, I didn't really like this first book. It was really like, I hear the word amateur tossed out a lot. And I'm like, keep reading, please keep reading. I didn't like the first book that much either. I'm so glad that I kept reading, because the series got so good and her writing evolves and the characters evolve and everybody becomes a lot less, I don't know. I feel like Grace is very whiny
infantile
in the first book. Yeah. She's very, oh, do I feel this way or this way? I don't know how I feel. And then once, you know, in the second book, she really starts developing a lot of her own character and becomes a really strong character as well.
The thing is, she doesn't really have anyone adult to go to. I know she has Macy, and Macy is a lovely person. She's great to go to for that, like, moral support, but she is a peer. She has exactly the same emotional issues as any other teenager, but Grace doesn't have that mum figure that she can go to and say, like, Mom, I'm feeling these feelings and I don't really know what to do with them. I really like this boy. I feel like Grace is probably only going through those emotions and going through them so severely because she is kind of on her own. And she can chat to Macy all she wants, but Macy's only ever going to react like a teenager would and be like, oh my gosh, I can't believe you didn't tell me this. Like, she's going to be that best friend with her feet like flipping in the back of the chair and twiggling the wire on the burger phone. Like, she's going to be the best friend, and she's not going to be able to give her solid adult advice. And it's not like she could go to Uncle Finn or any of her teachers because that's weird. So I feel like at this point, Grace really does need the therapist, not just for the fact that she's got her own emotional issues, but also she's going through quite a normal period of time. I know it's with a supernatural creature, but every girl and every boy and every gender in between will go through a period of liking someone and not really knowing what to do with those emotions. And talking through them helps. But she has no one to talk to.
Yeah, and the next note that you put down, I feel like that is, I mean, especially with Grace going through so many emotions, This is where the toxicity, I think, like first kind of seeps in. I mean, yeah, Jackson's been overbearing, but this moment in particular not only really makes me mad at Jaxon, it also is going to distance Grace's only adult family member and give him that perception of, oh, my niece is kind of an idiot. I need to keep a closer eye on her. Yeah. And that was when Grace is in Jackson's room, Foster's knocking on the door, and Jaxon goes to the door and says, sorry, but Grace did have to get her clothes back on.
Yeah, like, what a prick.
Like, why? What was...
there was no reason for it.
That's something that would have been funnier if it was Flint knocking on the door.
Yeah. Like, if it would have...
Anyone else, I would have laughed. Even Macy, I would have laughed, but it's her uncle.
Yeah, it's her uncle, and also it was their first like proper meeting with Uncle Finn after they have had a relationship-based experience. So, like, she was going to be embarrassed whether he was like, oh, sorry, we were just having a makeout session. That would also just be as embarrassing. But he went like one step further and almost pretended that something more had happened. And that is not something that anybody should have done. It should have been downplayed, if anything. It's like, oh, sorry, we were just having a study session or something. That just made me uncomfortable for all parties.
Yeah.
Like, Uncle Finn doesn't want to know.
No, that would have been end game for me. I mean, have you ever had like that guy in like high school who told the whole school that you did more than what you actually did, and then you're just like, that didn't happen.
Yeah, and you're like, why do you feel the need to pretend when I would have easily done that with you anyway?
You just ruined your chances.
Yeah, like, don't pretend because it could have actually happened. But now that you have said that that would happen, I'm going to give it a pass because I now know exactly what kind of person you would be if I had done that with you.
Yeah. Doing it for the like bragging rights.
Yeah, and I was like, okay, so I was trying to go through his motives for doing it. Because I was like, I know that Jaxon probably doesn't do anything for no reason. He definitely has ulterior motives. Like, he didn't just do it because he thought, oh, maybe this will be funny. Whereas, like, if Hudson or Flint had done it, it would have been, like, a wisecrack. It would have been like, this is a joke. Everybody knows that it's a joke because I am a funny person. I'm a sarcastic person. Jaxon is not a funny person. So
no, he never jokes with anybody.
No. So he would know that whoever he's doing it with, even if it was an attempt at humor, probably wouldn't have got that it was supposed to be a joke. And secondly, I was like, is he trying to get this joke to work on Grace's uncle or his headmaster? Because neither of those are a good role for this joke to work on.
I read it like he's trying to he's about to get in trouble for the thing that happened in the student lounge where he basically drank another student, and he was going to say something to kind of distract from that other terrible thing that he did by trying to insert something that would trigger an emotional response from Finn.
Oh, like a distraction. Which, like, if I talk about this worst thing that I did,
right,
we'll ignore what I actually did. When in fact, it would probably make the punishment more severe.
Yeah. Well,
I don't know. How old are they in this book? I know that Jaxon's a complicated timeline. 17.
Because Grace turns 18 in Covet.
And is that age of consent? I don't know much about age of consent in different countries.
If both parties are in the U.S., and I know that this is true for where I live. I'm not saying that all states are the same, but I believe that it is 16 as long as the other individual is also 16, and then once they are past 18, they may only be with someone who is 18 and up.
Because I'm thinking it's not just I have clearly had your niece naked and in your school, but also I'm wondering whether there was like fraternizing rules and stuff, because it's a school and it's a boarding school. They've got to have those rules in place. Like even if we're just speculating, they've got to have some kind of rules there, because otherwise they would have had little baby vampires and STDs everywhere.
I already thought that it was weird that Grace just goes to his room and just, I'm pretty sure, does she spend the night there at all?
I think she does in the next scene, because they have the dancing in the Northern Lights scene is next. And I think that was just because it was very late and something happened, which we will get into next episode. But I don't think it was ever deliberate. I don't think it was ever like I'm going to stay past my curfew or I'm going to stay in this boy's bed. I don't think it was ever her intention.
Yeah. I wonder if it's kind of like Jaxon being like, oh, well, I'm the prince, so you can't do anything about it, even if you wanted to.
Which is just, ugh, what a creep.
Yeah. Do you want to move on to spoilers? Because I have a few things that I definitely want to talk about.
Yes.
All right. Okay.
Would you want to stay in silence for a bit so you know where the wolf is?
Now I'll find it. It's fine. So I do think I almost slipped this during non-spoiler section, but I think that Grace spends a couple nights with Hudson in his room, by which time she is almost 18 and 18, because she has the birthday party in his room. So yeah, I'm starting to feel like maybe they don't have rules. Maybe it's oh, I guess do what you want, but don't get caught. Like, I don't know.
And I mean, I suppose that they can't really be that picky, because firstly, they all live there and they all kind of have been together since they were very, very young. The way that Macy told it was that there aren't very many romantic relationships about, because they've been together for so long. But if they did, they're probably very mature about it, because they either have been alive for 300 odd years or have known each other for over a decade.
Yeah, I mean,
and the temptation was the fact, like, when you're a teenager, you want it more because you can't have it and you have to actually travel to go get it. If they're down the corridor and you're allowed it, you're just like, meh.
I could argue, though, that when you finally, like, when there's someone that you've known for a very long time and you finally realize that there's chemistry between you, that there might be that, like, more of an impulse to be close to them because you're already comfortable with them because you've known them for so long, so that being around them is more natural.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah.
I think we're looking way too far into the rules at Katmere Academy.
Going in too deep. Maybe it was maybe it was in the guide to Katmere. We just skipped it because we were reading too fast.
Yeah, we read it. We read it in a day. I need to go back and look at it, and you need to read the bonus chapters as well for the other courts.
Okay, Mom.
Okay, Mom. So you're all the spoilers. You put them all in. I didn't really have a whole lot to add because you pretty much hit on everything. But they're all about Hudson.
Of course,
you
they are.
Explain yourself.
Explain yourself, young lady.
Explain yourself.
So one of the points was that even after never meeting Hudson, knowing that Jaxon would never kill someone who didn't deserve it, and also never even having a sibling to know what that dynamic is like, she knew that Hudson wouldn't want Jaxon to beat himself up over what happened. It's like she already knows that Hudson could be an okay person. Even though she's been told what he's done, she's still like, yeah, but he wouldn't want his little brother to be beating himself up, which was kind of nice.
It's nice on a reread. First time read, I'm like, Grace, you're stupid. You don't know nothing. Shut up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like rereading it as well, I was like, wait, is Hudders going to be king vamp? Like, was that ever brought up that he was going to be king if Cyrus died?
I think that's my big fan theory for court. It has been for a while, but I do think that it's going to come down to Hudson ruling the vampire court, Grace ruling the gargoyle court, and them uniting those two rivaling courts.
Mm-hmm. Because I don't think that any of the other kings and princes of any of the other courts are even close to a different monarchy.
Yeah,
and
there's no interspecies there.
Yeah, and I kind of forgot that Cyrus was king. I just thought of him as like all evil, powerful lord, kind of lord vampire. And I when I read through it, I was like, wait, I know that they're princes and they refer to themselves as princes of darkness and all of that, but I never realized that Hudders was going to be king. That's exciting. That's way more mature than a prince.
That sounds better. King Hudders.
And then the other thing was Jackson's no one is as powerful as me. And I was like, lol, psych.
Oh, that scene in Covet.
Oof. Give it to me.
The biggest of oofs.
Yeah, Hudson is way, way more powerful than Jaxon. And I am very confused as to why Jaxon never saw that. But like, even when it was just his controlling powers that Jaxon knew about, that would still be 10 times more powerful than being able to make things float and move. But then we also got like the disintegration power as well, which is just, for some reason, I simp hard for that.
Yeah, and Jaxon says that every generation of vampires is a little stronger than the last, but he and Hudson have the same parents. They would be the same generation. It doesn't matter that Hudson was a little bit older. If they're of the same parents, they would be the same generation. They are the next generation after their parents.
Oh my God, Can you imagine what Grace's and Hudson's children will be like?
Garvamps, Vamgoyles.
Vamgoyles.
Vamgoyles. They'll be little bats. They'll be able to fly.
And if Jaxon marries Flint, like we're really, 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 really hoping for, there will be no biological children between
vampires.
Which means that we don't know. We don't know because, like, we haven't seen any interspecies relationships going on, have we? They've all been like, we need to do this and keep the bloodline pure.
Yeah, it's just Grace. Grace is
you ruined it all, Grace.
Anomaly. Everybody wants the gargoyle, apparently. Yeah. Let's see. I love the note. They're shitting on my book husband, and I'm not happy.
No, they were being so mean about him. Like, really mean. It's like, have you ever been in a situation where you're hearing someone talk badly about someone that you really care about, and that you know that they are not the person that these people are describing, and you would stand up for them, like you would immediately stand up for them. But this is a book. You can't argue back.
Yeah. Well, with your note where you said, did any of this actually happen and Hudson was a scapegoat, or were we just so in love with Hudson that we forgot that it happened? I think that I just vaguely remember, and I'm glad that I don't, because I'm excited to reread it. But I believe that Hudson was going along with what his parents wanted him to do, but he was more trying to...
sabotage it from beneath.
Sabotage from beneath. He knew that if he was in control of everything, that nothing really bad would happen. He was taking the blame upon himself. He let Jaxon kill him. He was really kind of sacrificing himself for the greater good here, making himself out to be the bad person. And I think that that's why he's so distraught when he and Grace come out of her gargoyle, because he finally, it's like all that happened, everyone hated him, and then he built this wonderful bond with Grace while she was in stone, which thankfully we'll get that in Charm. But then when she wakes back up, he's back to square one. She hates him. She has no idea who he is. And then he's just lost everything. After finally having something, everyone's back to hating him again. And he has to make the choice to either start over trying to convince everyone, or just give up and be an asshole. And I think for a while, giving up and being an asshole was probably what I would have done.
Yeah, and if anything, it kind of made me love him more. Like, if he was the kind of person that tried to, like, because we know that he did from the Guide to Katmere's bonus chapters, we did read that he was trying. He was buying cinnamon rolls, and he was picking up wildflowers and things for Grace. And I was like, yeah, but if he was 100% that person, I would be like, what a creep, what a stalker, stay away from me. You're not a real person. Like, it would be like, like those creepy admirers that come out of the woodwork, where you find that they've been keeping a diary and they've got a room with just pictures of you, and you're like, oh. Yeah. It would be like that, rather than Hudson being his little sarky self. You feel like, oh yeah, he's got emotions that are outside of our relationship, that he is his own person, that he can be sarcastic, and I can still love him even at his worst. And his worst is not that bad. But then that could just be me liking mean guys.
Well, I mean,
it was his humor. Like let's be honest, it was his humor. It was the way that he joked around, and that he wasn't serious, and that he was okay with having a bit of a fun, bit of a laugh. He wasn't too concerned about not taking the piss out of himself or out of other people either. That was the reason why we fell in love with him. It wasn't because he was just doing endless amounts of like random acts of love where you're just like, ugh, can't stop it.
It's that the humor paired with... Oh, okay. So here's the moment when I like turned Team Hudson.
It was the moment he said hello, wasn't it? It was the moment he said hello. Let's be honest.
Yes. The what took you so long? No. It was the combination of of the humor, but then the moments when Grace was like being really crappy with him, he would have just a couple little seconds where he would break and actually like be in pain by it. And if he didn't care about Grace, he would have no reason to be upset when she said things about him. My
and not
favorite
even that is
line,
the way that he reacted was also that he could be truthful about what kind of person he was as well, because somebody who is that bad wouldn't be hurt and upset in a quiet way about being that kind of person.
Yeah. And my favorite line of Crush, and there's no reason, like, I doubt it's anybody else's favorite line, but he and Grace are bickering in her room, and he says, "You're gonna push me too far one of these days. You know that, right?" And I don't know why, but that's my favorite line of the entire book. He like hits that breaking point where he is like, "You are going to push me too far." And that, yes, would that
have made you push him too far? You'd be like, okay, there's a challenge now.
push the buttons, push the buttons, push the buttons. Yeah. But that shows that like he was hurting. He punched a wall. And actually broke through like whatever plane of existence he was in when he was in Grace's head. He punched a wall and created an actual hole in the wall. There were multiple moments where he just broke down emotionally and was genuinely upset. And somebody who actually had committed such atrocious crimes and owned up to it, I don't think they would have acted like that. And that was like when I started being like, okay, maybe Hudson isn't the bad guy. Maybe we were misled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was really good writing on Tracy's part, because I've never fallen maybe other than Rhysand, which you call Rhysand, which really frustrates me. But Rhysand, I fell for him the moment that he met Feyre at that. Was it the Midsummer Ball or the whatever it was at Tamlin's court?
The weird orgy in the cave thing.
Yeah. That the moment that he came out, just the writing style just was like, this is the man. This is the man that all of the books are going to be about. Doesn't matter that she's currently in love with Tamlin. This is the man. And that is exactly how I felt about Hudson. And I've never reacted so much like, because I would want Hudson as a husband, not Rhys. I like Rhys and all, and Rhys is a great guy, but he's not for me. Hudson, I would punch through a dungeon to get to him.
Is it because he's British?
No, because this is going to be really funny, because I didn't realize that he was British until you mentioned, so what do you think of all the Britishisms? And I was like, wait, what? Like, I didn't register that any of them were specifically to sound British. And I think that that's because she wrote him so well that I was like, oh, he's just like my husband. Speaking of which, what did you guys think of my husband's rendition of Hudson being angry?
We didn't get any comments on that at all, so I feel like it was that awkward thing at the end where everyone's like, we're going to pretend that didn't happen.
Poor guy had no notice. He had no notice, and we were like, read this, and he's like, oh, okay.
Yeah, and Amber just picked a random scene, too. She was just like, here, and she just shoved her tablet at him, like, here, read this. Yeah, let us know if you guys want more Hudson by Scott. It sounds like a...
It sounds like a perfume.
Hudson by Scott. Let us know.
Parfum pour homme.
All right. Are you ready for fan polls?
Yes, I am.
All right. So this week, Amber did our fan polls, and the first poll is, did you believe that Flint had tried to kill Grace before he admitted to it in the dungeon? So when Jaxon is actually, telling Grace everything and saying, oh, Flint tried to kill you. And Grace is just like,
nah, he didn't.
No way. And, Amber, what do you think the majority voted here?
I'm going to say the majority said no, that they didn't believe that Flint could do that.
Oh, you was wrong. You was very wrong.
Man, people believe Jaxon straight away. I'll be like, no, I think you're wrong. I think it's going to be someone that we haven't even met. It's going to be that just like the weird janitor that nobody knows about.
It's the werewolves. It's got to be the werewolves. They've been sketched from the beginning.
Well, I've read enough fiction now, and I know this sounds really big-headed. I've read enough fiction now that I can almost tell when a red herring is thrown out, and I thought that Flint was a red herring. That it was like,
yeah,
he sounds suspicious in certain places, but he's actually just a good guy that we've just been reading wrong. And it turns out that the red herring wasn't the person culpable for the thing. It was actually this random guy that you were like, oh man, I should have known it was him all along. It turns out it was Leah and Flint. So,
yeah. To be fair, I mean, he was bad for.
Yeah.
But yeah.
But he still was a good guy afterwards. It wasn't like Flint was a dick the whole time, and that we need to actually kill him and remove him from the universe, because he was a really good guy. He was just in the wrong circumstance.
Yeah, that's the other thing in Crave that if I could do like a request to rewrite, I would rewrite Flint being thrown by Jaxon, and I would get rid of the whole scene in the dungeon with Flint trying to kill Grace. I felt like it was just, I mean, if all the little attempts, the chandelier and all that, that's fine.
The flirting attempt.
Yeah, the whole and the flirting attempt, that, you know, whatever, but the whole like where he's grabbing her and throwing her against the walls and really trying to murder her in the dungeon, that's where I would be like, I would remove those. Okay, so 63% said yes. 63% said that they believed that Flint actually did try to kill Grace, and only 37% said no.
Man.
So those results might change by the end of the night, but that's where they are right now. And then do you want to read the actual fan question?
Yeah. So I kind of structured it in the way of as a point of view is that your uncle and guardian has just interrupted you in your partner's bedroom after a fully clothed makeout session. Your boyfriend or girlfriend says after opening the door, sorry, but they did have to get their clothes back on. What would you do and what would you say?
All right. So we don't have a lot of answers because we asked this like right before starting the episode, but most people are pretty, the answers are very consistent. One person said, freak out.
Yeah.
One said, I'd smack them for saying that. One said, Jaxon, shut up. One person said, silently pray to the floor or for the floor to open and swallow me whole. Yeah, that sounds like me.
Yeah, I would say not funny to my partner and tell my guardian that I was fully clothed the whole time.
Yeah, just he's joking. I was clothed, which is I mean that's pretty much what Grace says.
The thing is, at no point would you think like, or if I protest too much, then Uncle Finn might believe it.
Yeah,
and then I'll be in trouble.
Right, no matter what, you're going to have that doubt. Like, oh my God, he probably believes this. Like, have you ever told the truth and you still weren't believed, even when you were telling the truth, especially as like a teenager, like where your parents catch you doing something and you're telling the truth and they're just like, no. And then you start freaking out even more.
No, well, I was with you for the first half, and I was going to say most of the time that I was in Ohio when I was trying to explain certain things in the UK, and you didn't believe me. But yeah, no, I think that I've been in those situations, and I couldn't ever name you one of the situations where nobody believed me that I had actually been. Well, I suppose there was so I had a relationship with somebody that I really should not have when I was very young, and it was against my parents' wishes, and it was illegal, and I was very young and he was not very young, and somehow the school knew about it and they were spreading rumors, and obviously it was true that I was in a relationship with him and that I really should not have been, but they jumped to the conclusions that I was also pregnant. And that spread around. And I couldn't tell anybody that I wasn't, because my brain was like, well, they have reasons to believe that I am. And I just need to kind of prove that I'm not, through my actions, not with my words. And it didn't work. It, like, nothing that I did removed that stain from my record. And in the end, I moved schools for my sixth form just to kind of remove myself from that environment and put myself somewhere else. And that was after I'd ended the relationship as well. But there's something to, like, tarnish your reputation as well. Even if you're a goody two shoes, like I was a proper nerd. I was a prefect. I was the nerdiest of the nerds. And yet people were so fast to believe that I would do that to myself. And it was because there was an element of truth behind it.
I think it's easy to gravitate towards the shocking news when it comes to the person that you least expect, especially when it is somebody in a school who, you know, where they're very, like, proficient with their work, and that's the person that you're going to be like, whoa, no way. And
it's going to start more conversations.
Right. And then everything's going to get blown out of proportion.
Whereas if it was the person that you would most expect to be pregnant by the end of the school year, like, people would say that and you go, yeah, and so yeah. What?
All right. Well, I'm losing my voice. I don't know if you guys I don't know if you guys have caught it. Maybe it's because we haven't done the podcast in a while, but I'm starting to lose my voice. So I think we're going to cut it here. Guys, thanks so much for listening. We are going to attempt to get the rest of Crave finished up in the next 2 episodes or 3 episodes?
3 episodes, because that will also include the after the dungeon episode where they build a snowman and our Hudders comes back to life.
Yes, with his sword of glory.
We never hear from that sword ever again. Where did that sword go?
It's stuck inside of Grace. It got sucked in with Hudson.
I like to think that, like, she has this, like, gargoyle house inside her when she goes to her gargoyle first, and she's just got it above the mantelpiece. Like, it's ornamental. This is the thing that brought us together.
She'll pass it down to her children. Oh God. I hope that I just one final remark. I hope that they don't have children, and only because I get so sick of reading romances where they have kids at the end. I'm just like, oh, like I have a kid.
Leave it open. Leave it open to the fact that they might have kids in the future. Don't end it on she's pregnant, because ugh. And also, I would think that Hudson would maybe not want to bring anything into the world where Cyrus could possibly have a resurgence. I don't know.
I think he's gonna die. I think Cyrus and Delilah.
Oh, I thought you meant Hudson, and my heart just went. No.
No, I think Cyrus and Delilah are gonna die, and I think that Hudson's gonna take their place. However, I think that I get really sick of, like, oh, the end game is that the woman has a child. Like, that doesn't need to be end game. That's
maybe Tracy is rewriting Breaking Dawn in the most natural way possible, and Grace gets pregnant because she offers to be a surrogate for Flint and Jaxon.
Oh no!
That would be a normal baby giving to her previous lover / boyfriend.
And then who will imprint on the baby?
No one.
No one.
No.
No more imprinting. No more. No imprinting on babies. Yeah.
Let's just say no babies. That would be great.
No babies. Babies are cool, but I could do without. I had a baby in real life. I don't need babies in my magic fantasy super cool world. You know, I hate it in 50 Shades when you're reading it and then at the end, Anastasia is pregnant and Christian is smacking her around while she's pregnant. I'm like, oh, come on now. That's the last thing that I wanted when I was pregnant.
And goes to visit his ex-partner as well. His ex-dominatrix / abuser. He goes to visit her because he can't deal with the fact that his girlfriend / wife is were they wives? Were they?
Yes, they were married.
Yeah. His wife is pregnant. Oh dear God, what we do?
Oh, it's all bad.
Yeah,
it's all bad.
It's all bad, and I think that it's because it's so overdone that you can just think that every pregnancy is unhealthy.
Yeah.
So let's just not do it. Poor Tracy's listening to it like, Grace has 3 babies during court.
Baby Luca, Jaxon Jr.,
Xavier.
And little Xavier Jr. And God. All right, guys.
And then
thanks so much.
godmother Heather.
Godmother Heather the were-crab. This is Jaxon Jr. were-crab Foster.
This has devolved. I think that we need more coffee, clearly.
I need more coffee. All right, guys. Thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Bye-bye.